Everybody. This is our very first online chapter meeting with New York Times bestselling author Karen Abbott, and we want to thank everybody for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And we're going to do the same format as before. We're just going to ask her questions and let her talk about her experience writing this book and everything we talked about before. I know we did a Facebook Live earlier this week, and it was a little chaotic because we didn't know a few things about how Facebook does their Facebook Lives.
Yeah.
But this is a chance for us to redeem ourselves on the technical side of this.
I think it turned out okay, though. I think it was okay.
All right. Well, who has the first question?
Well, I'm going to ask, how did you, since I didn't see it the other night, how did you come to write this subject matter?
Oh, it's a good question. I usually get my ideas from dusty old archives and libraries and out-of-print books, but I actually got this idea from television. Did anybody here watch Boardwalk Empire, which was on HBO?
No, because I don't get HBO, so.
Oh yeah, I'm guessing you can get it elsewhere now, because it's kind of an old show. You could probably stream it from another source, but anyway, it was this really brilliant show about the beginning of Prohibition, and it was brilliant because it perfectly captured this era when bootleggers were trying to figure out how to circumvent the Prohibition laws. It was right in the beginning, and nobody had yet heard of Al Capone at all. And there was this minor character named George Remus, and he sort of stole every scene he was in. He came in and he spoke of himself in the third person, and he said things like, Remus has the good stuff. America has to come to Remus to get it. And he would, say things to Steve Buscemi's character, like, Remus finds you petty and resentful. And he was kind of used as comic relief. But I wondered if he was actually a real historical figure, because I knew a lot of the people in the show were historical figures. And indeed, George Remus was a real person. And it turns out he actually did speak of himself in the third person. And he said things like, this is going to be a hell of a Christmas for Remus. So many people want to kill Remus. And my personal favorite, he said, Remus's brain exploded. Which is something bizarre that sort of ties into the book later on. But I started looking into him, and his character and his story were so much more fascinating than anything that was on Boardwalk Empire. And I was really sold on his story. And so I just began digging, and luckily there was a lot of source material for me to work with. It was a lot of fun. So I could keep talking about this, but I want to make sure people could ask questions.
Well, I was starting to write a question, but I guess I'm on live now. Since you were in Philadelphia, Philadelphia, did you ever visit the Eastern State Penitentiary? Penitentiary, yeah. And to go into the jail, and you saw where Al Capone lived?
Yeah.
Once they found him?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one of the woman in my book, there was a prosecutor named Mabel Walker Willenbrandt, who was also a major character, who was quite an anomaly. She was 32 years old in 1921 when President Warren Harding appointed her to be the Assistant Attorney General. She was 5 years out of law school and had never prosecuted a single case in her career. And I think that she was appointed because Warren Harding and all the crooked bosses at the Justice Department were like, let's put the little lady in charge. She's not going to know what she's doing. She's going to be overwhelmed, and we'll be able to continue our cozy relationship with bootleggers, taking bribes, having a quid pro quo. And of course, Mabel Willenbrandt took her oath of office and just began kicking butt. She just went out for all the bootleggers. And I bring her into it at this point. Number one, she's a fascinating character. Number two, she was the one who wrote the law, who made it possible for Al Capone to get arrested for tax evasion. She is the one who's directly responsible for putting Al Capone in jail. But before Al Capone, she went after George Remus. But she was quite a really fascinating figure in history, too, and one that it's surprising that she was lost to history, because back in the 1920s, she was the most famous woman in the country. So.
Yes, and that's something you never hear about in history books, is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, women get written out of history a lot because it was written by men for men.
That's right. Sorry,
And,
Paul.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's just so, any minority's experience was written out of history by the white men. So,
Yeah.
but Willem Brandt, I mean, in addition to all of the hardships he had to deal with, sexism and et cetera, he was also entirely deaf, like almost entirely deaf, and she had to wear hearing aids. And she would spend an hour every morning fashioning her hairstyle over her ears so that nobody could see her hearing aids. And she just didn't want her male colleagues to know she was also dealing with that hardship. So she just was a fascinating character, and she went after George Remus and sort of declared him to be public enemy #1. And they have a really interesting, fun cat and mouse game that develops in the story, as well as Remus's own cat and mouse game with his wife, which to me was the craziest part of the story at all. And I couldn't actually believe it was nonfiction. It was, it was just stranger than fiction to me. So I don't know how many people here have actually read the book yet, because I don't want to give too many spoilers away if you haven't read.
I haven't gotten to. I have it right on my phone, and I'm in the middle of just starting to get to read it. I read last month's book, and now I'm on this one. So
all right, yeah. I won't give you any of the big spoilers then. I will say this: I tried to write the book as a whodunit. Like sort of at one point, Remus and his wife are both so crazy and both so angry with each other that it's feasible that either one of them could have killed the other. And I like to leave it a little bit of a whodunit because people, if people don't know the story, they usually can't guess until the end. So I won't spoil it for you. But I could talk a little bit about my research and how I was able to do a sort of whodunit. So I found out that there was a trial transcript at Yale University Law School that was about 5,500 pages. And a trial transcript is like a rare piece of brilliant history because usually they're discarded, especially trial transcripts from the 1920s. Like they don't usually exist. So as soon as I found out that this existed, I hightailed it up to Yale University, and I spent like a week from opening to closing, Xeroxing every single page of this transcript. And the transcript had really great tidbits in it. One of my favorites was that George Remus did not wear underwear, and and in the 1920s, apparently this was cause for great alarm. It was potentially the sign of an unsound mind, not wearing underwear, and it just gave you a little glimpse into what psychiatry was in the 1920s and how people thought about murder. And it was also, a trial transcript, the nature of a trial transcript is people get up there and say, I was doing this, I was feeling this, I was thinking this, he said this, then I did this, and then I reacted this way. So it really lets you create cinematic scenes in a way that nonfiction usually doesn't allow for. Usually you don't get the primary source material. I'm not allowed to make up dialogue. I'm not allowed to make up events. I'm not allowed to make up people. Everything has to come from the record. And so I was so lucky with this book to have so much primary source material with such great detail that I could actually really fashion it like a novel. So it was really great fun to do that, the research of this book. And I would get so immersed in it that I would forget, I was in 2018, I would just completely forget. And that's what I really love doing about this kind of work. You really feel like you're in the business of time travel. And if I'm doing my job well, people will read the book and feel like they were transported too. So my bird is squawking for attention.
So Karen, I have a question about your research, and that's very interesting that you, like, from a primary source, so you got all these details.
Yeah.
So you actually had to write dialogue. When you then publish the book, then you have to get permission from those sources, or?
No, the only time you ever have to do that is if the only thing you really have to get permission from these days is like a photograph. If I were going to use a photograph, that would be something I would have to get permission for. But this is from a trial transcript, so it was a public record. I don't have to consult with anybody. A lot of the books I was consulting with are past I think it's 90 years. So once they're past 90 years of publication, it's in fair use. It's public domain. So you're allowed to quote from it however long, however extensively you wish. Newspapers are always in the public domain. The only time you have to worry about it is, say, if it was a more recent, maybe a more recent book where somebody owns the rights to it, you would have fair use, it would apply. But I didn't have to worry about any of those things. I did have to buy a couple of the photographs because they, like the newspaper morgues were bought up by like Getty and things. They would go in and buy all the defunct newspaper morgue photographs and stuff like that. So that's the only thing I really had to deal with. And, you know, it's so funny. Usually, you know, I work with dead people, right? All of my characters are dead for the most part. So sometimes it's frustrating because you can't go back and interview the dead people. But luckily, I think this is the first time when the dead people all did exactly what I wanted them to do. So, so that was really fortunate. It's that rare instance where you know the story really played out in a fantastic way, and I couldn't have made it up. So, so yeah. So for once, the dead people behaved, and usually, you know, they're easier to deal with than live people. So I usually prefer working with dead people. I'm sure that sounds very strange, but yeah.
So are there any family members of any of these people?
It's so funny. I did speak with a couple family members before while I was writing the book. I was able to connect with Ruth Remus. Imogene Remus's like a niece who was talked about Ruth Remus, who was Imogene's daughter. I was able to get some information about Ruth Remus's fate. She ended up having kind of a sad life, which I'll leave for the book I write about in the book. But they were able to confirm some things about Imogene and her relationship with George. It was very helpful. I also connected with, there's a woman on Facebook. She's actually pretty active in her own research. Her name is Diane Garum. And her ancestor had been close friends with Remus in his circle, working with him on his distilleries. And so she was really actually able to give me some photographs, some information about how they worked. So she's been really great. And then after the book was published, I heard from a couple people who are actually related to Remus, with the surname of Remus. And a lot of them were like, yeah, their ancestors didn't really like to talk about him too much. Like, you know, he's a little bit of a black sheep in the family. And after we're told, yeah, so I you know, told me stories about his later life that were kind of interesting. So anyway, yeah, so I was able to talk with a couple people that were really helpful, and it's always fun to hear from them after the fact because they inevitably come back with stories about, well, did you hear this one? And I usually didn't. And artifacts, you know, people come back with artifacts. I did a talk recently where somebody was at the fancy New Year's Eve party that Remus threw in December of 1921, which I should talk about because it's one of the great scenes, one of the greater scenes of the book. But they talked about the party favors that Remus gave away. You know, he gave away, every man got a diamond stick pin, every woman got a brand new 1922 car.
Oh yeah.
And every person there had $1,000 bill tucked under their plate. And I think that would be the equivalent of, you know, us looking under our dinner plates and finding like $14,000. Like, it's really a staggering number, a staggering amount of wealth that he threw around at the time. Really kind of disgusting considering the average salary was $1,200 a year. So.
Wow.
But it was those parties that made people think he was the inspiration for Jay Gatsby and The Great Gatsby, and I think there's some truth to that. So.
Was there ever a time that you wished that you were writing fiction? Was there like a scene that you wanted to add in or change how things went?
You know, there usually is. Like I've written, this is my fourth nonfiction book, and there's always been a time, like my first book, Sin in the Second City, was about madams who ran the most famous brothel in the world in the early 1900s. And I often wish when the people wanted to shut them down that they like took a stand and had rifles out of their window and shot all the cops. Like I wanted some crazy sort of showdown, but that didn't happen. But in this book, I have to be honest, there's nothing I think I would have written differently. It was such a stranger than fiction tale. I don't think that writing it as fiction, an editor would have been like, no, this is a little bit too crazy. you got to back it up a little bit. But it was all nonfiction, so it was true. But I will tell you this, there are many stories I come across where I'm like, wow, this is a really interesting story. Let me see how much primary source material this is. Can I make it a nonfiction book? And it turns out there's not enough primary source material, and I could never make a nonfiction book out of it. So I'm always filing those away, saying, oh, I might write a novel about that. That would be a good novel because I can fill in the blanks. So I do want to write a novel one day. I'm actually tinkering around with one now, so we'll see. One day I'm going to actually be serious about it. It's scary. It's scary to think about writing fiction. You know, you wonder if you're going to be somebody like me who's only written nonfiction. Am I going to be paralyzed by too much freedom, or am I going to feel liberated? And right now I'm not sure. You know, I always, you know, feel like if you have too much freedom, you're not going to know what to do, but I'm going to give it a shot. So I have a thing I'm working on now.
How long did it take you to write the book when you got the idea? You got the idea from Boardwalk, and then you started to do the research, and then so you wrote the book, and it's been published now. When was it? When did it come out?
It came out in August, just this past August.
So it's just the 2019.
Yeah.
So how did you do that? What was your process there?
So it usually takes me about 4 years average. It's because I love the research so much, and you can't have too much research. The more, I think there's like two keys to writing good narrative nonfiction. The first is, does the story have a clear narrative arc? Is there a beginning, middle, and end? Do tensions escalate? Do the stakes get higher? Is there some sort of satisfying conclusion? So that's number one. And number two, you just have to have the primary source material. If you're going to write dialogue, you need letters, you need diary entries, you need memoirs, you need people who weren't afraid to talk to the press, you need lots of interviews. If you're lucky, you get a court transcript. And so taking the time to go through all that stuff is really time consuming. Like the trial transcript that was 5,500 pages, I think I took 4 full months just to read it and take notes. And those notes, just that outline from reading that, was about 85,000 words, which was almost the length of the book itself. So just the notes took, 85,000 words, and then you have to go back and figure out how to put the story together. So that takes quite a while. And the other thing is I tend to fall in what I call a rabbit hole of research. And I learned the hard way with my first book. I think I might have talked about this the other day a little bit. You find some interesting tangent that's related to your main story, but it's a little bit of a tangent. You start going down this rabbit hole. And for my first book, it was contraceptive methods in the early 1900s. I had to know all about contraceptive in the early 1900s. And of course, I lost myself for like maybe 2 months looking into different kinds of condoms and sheepskin and the douches and the pills and all the things that people did back in the early 1900s. And I ended up writing a paragraph. After this 2 months of research, I ended up writing a paragraph in the book. And then I think my editor cut the paragraph, so it was only like a sentence. So I basically wasted 2 months of my life doing something that ended up being a sentence in the book, which is very bad because then I'm late finishing the book and then I don't get paid and everybody's very sad. And I realized after that I had to learn how to research and write at the same time. So I sort of kept myself on track. If I was going to go on a tangent, it was because I knew the tangent was going to be important and it was going to be included in the story, and it had to be done. So I've been much better about that lately, but it still takes a lot of time, especially when you're lucky to have a plethora of research. I think my longest was the Civil War book, just because I had to relearn everything about the Civil War. I completely, last time I studied it was in high school, and I had to even just go back through the basics again. And I think this book took me about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. Once I had the research, it was pretty fast because the narrative was so clear. And it was really a joy. I've never had so much fun writing a book. I have to say that. So.
That's great.
So. Anyone else?
Thought I heard Sonny.
Well,
Everybody on
I
board?
could ask you another question about your research, I guess.
Yeah,
It's, I think when you're writing characters, fictional characters, you have to know everything about them. So that time you spent for 2 months looking up contraceptive information, I mean, maybe it wouldn't be that just like a one topic, but like you need to know everything about that person, even if it doesn't get in the book.
Yes.
So were there other times that you like maybe and how did, even in that situation, that the information that you had because of the research, did it help you some other way with the writing the book? Or
Yeah, I think everything that you learn informs the story, right? Like, you know, people talk about in fiction world building, right? You talk about world building in fiction. You have to, what's the setting? What's the time period? What were the people interested in? Who are your characters? What's important to them? What does the town square look like? Who does the leader of the town look like? What are the different relationships with people in the town? And so that has to be done in nonfiction too. You need to world build. You need to world build the real reality of something, that a time and place that actually existed. You have to do as much world building for nonfiction as you would for fiction. So it does. So I count that stuff as world building. You know, here were women who were desperate in the early 1900s. And they were, you know, sometimes forced in these circumstances. What would they do? How would they handle it? What were the different emotional reactions? You know, it's all important to do it. I should never say it's a waste. It's never a waste, but you have to learn to be a little bit economical with how fast and how much time you spend. And world building with Prohibition. I mean, I studied the life of a Prohibition agent. What did they do all day? How were they recruited? You know, Mabel Walker Willenbrandt. What did it look like when she went and argued before the Supreme Court against bootleggers? I spent probably, that's the thing about nonfiction too. I could be on a roll in writing, and then I have to stop and maybe spend the next 2 hours, the rest of the day, just looking up one single fact that's going to finish that one single paragraph. So it's like I could spend an entire day on a single paragraph, but it's important because it's world building. I remember spending a couple hours looking up what the Supreme Court would have looked like back then, where she went and argued her cases. What did her office look like inside of the Justice Department? You know, what did people wear if you were a Prohibition officer? Like, you know, just those kinds of things that anything that you might expect to read in a novel about a character or a place, I would want people to be able to read that in my nonfiction. So it is. You're right. It is vital to still look at all of those tangential things and consider them part of the whole. So.
Well, this is also a credibility issue, because so many people like you have access to looking things up. And I know I'll start reading a book and I end up going down the rabbit hole Googling characters and things like this because it's interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And then I find out way more than I intended to, but, you know, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
But, you know, so many people do have that same access, and you want to be right. You want to be credible.
Let me ask you a question. Do you save your Googling for after you finish the book so you don't get spoiled?
Oh, heck no.
Oh, you're gonna spoil the story for yourself.
Not always. Usually what I'm looking up doesn't always spoil the story.
Okay.
And sometimes I already know the story anyway. It's just interesting to read, you know, someone like you who's done the research and the storyline that you go with versus what I already know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, you know, but no, I will go down a rabbit hole like you were talking about, Googling and looking at different things, even if it's just some off the wall comment, you know, or something, you know.
Yeah. No, it's fun to do that. It's fun to you get to feel like you experience the world yourself a little bit. And I don't know, if it's a subject that interests you, you know, why not? I'm glad people do that. People become invested in the story, you know?
Well, I probably do it more with historical fiction than nonfiction, because I know that nonfiction, they've done their homework. But the historical fiction, you get into it and you go, did that really happen?
Right. Like, what's the fact and what's the fiction? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Betty, that's what's so important about having an author and doing these Zooms is because,
I lost you.
can you hear me?
I can.
Kat, I didn't see you there. Hi, Kat.
I'm here. I was a little late. I had a phone call. But what I was going to say, this is why Zooms are so important and why this new program is great, because you may not have put those things in the book, Karen, but you're able to share those research things with us that help to bring the story into fuller understanding.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing is we all bring our own experiences into a read, and we don't all have the same background, so we can ask you. And that's why these are so, I'm so excited. This is my third time listening to you, and I learned something.
You must be bored to death of me right now.
No. Every time I hear something new and I think, oh, okay. And that makes me want to go back and research some more too, or do more reading, or go back and read. So that's,
There's Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, everybody.
Well, one thing too, though, it also gives the readers, whether they be new or older readers or, well-established readers, an idea of the work that an author puts into a book. Yeah. Some people just think, they just sit this down and write it, not. It's like birthing a baby and then some.
It really is. It really is. It's so funny because all my writer friends make the joke, like, you always forget how hard it is to have a baby, but then you go ahead and do it again. And then it's the same with the book. It's like you forget how miserable it can be, and then you go ahead and do it again. But I actually don't have this is my only baby. So,
well, taking 4 years to write a book, that is worse than birthing a baby.
It might be. I fully respect anybody who's a mom who can do that, because I just wasn't cut out for it. But but a book is it's pretty rough. But you're right. It's really fun to have the context where anything you could do to make the world come to life for you. Because I think that's the point of these books, the point of historical fiction and the point of historical nonfiction. You want to be transported. You just want to forget you're in 2018 or you want to forget you're in the middle of the coronavirus. I mean, you just want to be put somewhere else for a while. And and I don't know if I can give anybody if I could do anything for my books, that's the thing I would most want to do, is just transport people and make them forget their own life for a little bit.
Well, I have to give you an example of me right now. I took a cryptography class at Ollie, and so the lady who was married to the instructor sat beside me, and she said, "Have you read the book Code Girls?" And I said, "I have it in my TBR stack, which is a mile high." I said, "But I haven't read it yet." So she suggested that I read it. Well, now I'm transported back to World War II and all of these women working in Washington to the tune of almost 14,000 women.
Yeah.
And breaking codes.
I worked that book with my friend. Liza Mundy is a good friend of mine. So
yes, I mean, honestly, I saw that. Yes, I saw that. And I said, it's very interesting, like you're talking about, is all of the background that goes into this, and it was very good. It's very good.
Yeah, it is a good book, but I'm glad. Anything that can sort of transport you. I just think that's the point of reading, in a way. So, you transport you to another time and place, transport you to a different mindset, anything that just gets you out of your own head for a little bit. So.
And I love history, so that's a plus anyway.
Yeah, good. Well, I hope you love the book.
Well, it's moved up in my stack.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm telling
you, the writers are outnumbering me so much that I can't read them all so fast.
You know what? It's a good problem to have. It's a very good problem to have.
It is. Audible is wonderful. When I walk, I listen. So that's one thing that helps too.
Yeah. I do hear that the audiobook for The Ghost of Eden Park is really good. I hear that the actors, I never listened because I can't listen to my own stuff afterward, but I hear the actors were really good.
Oh, good. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Karen, you say that you only write nonfiction.
For now, I'm working on a novel.
What's your what's your background, and were you a history major? You're just interested in all this history that it's not all one era. You seem to.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you the story. I wanted to go to law school. I grew up thinking I was going to be a lawyer. I think I had a big crush on Susan Day in LA Law when I was a kid. I was
Dating yourself.
I totally am. I don't care. I'm among friends. I was obsessed with Susan Day, and I really wanted to be a lawyer. And I went to college majoring in English, thinking that would be a good, I'd get good grades and I could get into law school. And then in the middle of my junior year, I got an internship at Philadelphia Magazine, and I became obsessed with this magazine. It was full of crazy journalists. They were really eccentric, really fun. And what they did, I couldn't believe. You would go out and you would interview people, and you would become somebody else for like a period of time. And you would write this story and just your whole life would just be subsumed by this other person's story. And there was nothing more fascinating to me than to be able to immerse yourself so deeply in someone else's story that it just obliterated yourself for a while. And I don't know what that says about me, but I thought it was fascinating. And I was like, that is what I want to do. And I was lucky enough, this is the olden days, when I graduated from college in 1995, there were still print journalism jobs to be had. So I was able to graduate college and get a journalism job at a paper in Philadelphia. And got my start there. So I spent 6 years being a journalist in Philadelphia. And then my grandmother, my dearly departed, wonderful grandmother, you can see her as a kid right there at her first Holy Communion picture. Oh, and there's Minna Everly. So my dearly departed grandmother told me this bit of family lore. Her mother and it was my mother's grandmother. Sorry, no. My great-grandmother, so my grandmother's mother and her sister, they emigrated from Slovenia in 1905, and the sister went to Chicago and was never heard from again. And I was always intrigued and haunted by this, and I started looking into what was going on in Chicago in 1905, and I came upon a clipping of Marshall Field Jr. He was the son of the department store guy, Marshall Field. He got shot.
Wonderful store.
And he's shot in a brothel. And this brothel was owned by these two mysterious sisters who ran this lavish establishment where you had to pay $50 just to step in the door in 1900. And it was this politicians and celebrities and sports figures and royalty all over from around the world would come and visit. And I immediately forgot all about my missing ancestor and was more interested in these sisters, which sounds terrible, but and that turned into my first book. And then I fell in love with history then, and I've been a big history buff ever since. So
I thought you were going to say that you found out that the missing woman was one of the brothel owners.
Well, you know what? She was never found. And at that time, there were a lot of girls disappearing in Chicago. And it's very conceivable that something bad happened to her. She was very poor, had just come over, didn't speak any English. She was ripe for exploitation. So, I don't know what happened to her, but, and something like that could have happened. There are many brothels. I'd be, in fact, honestly, she would have been lucky if she ended up in the Everly Club, because they took care of they paid them a good wage and gave them medical care and fed them gourmet meals, even tutored them in the poetry of Longfellow. It was, it was kind of a crazy establishment.
Wow.
But who knows? She very well might have ended up in one of these places. So that's how I got into history. I don't have any history degree. I'm all sort of, I just applied my journalistic training to the past pretty much. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
And you do a lot of research, that's for sure.
I do. I think I have more footnotes in this endnotes in this book than any other. I must have 80 pages of endnotes. It's kind of crazy. I think I went a little overboard. But you have to. They'll pick on you if you don't. So better be safe than sorry.
It goes back to that credibility.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You just want to have all your ducks in a row.
That's right.
You need to read all of her books, because I'm telling you, they're all fabulous.
Kat is my big cheerleader from a long time ago. So, mwah.
Therein lies my problem. I fall in love with an author, then I go back and get everything and start reading.
That's not a problem.
No, that's what I do. I end up. That's why my house looks like a library.
Yeah, no,
and Kathy knows.
It's a good thing. And you're supporting that person so they're able to keep their job. So.
Yeah.
Well, right now it's so important because we're all stuck with everything being canceled. So we're very excited that Karen's got this book out there, and she's going to be on Breathless Bubbles and Books Monday to talk some more. So we'll keep this going.
Yes.
Hey, Karen, can you tell us the story of how you met Kathy?
Yes. Oh, I love the story of how I met Kathy. Beauty in the Book had just launched. I went down to Jefferson, Texas. Was it Jefferson or wait, it was somebody else?
Jefferson?
Mm-hmm. It was Jefferson. And I went into Kathy's parlor and I fell in love with this. I was like, who was this fantastic woman, like wearing these amazing leopard print pants? I was like, I want this lady to give me a makeover. So I sat down in her chair and she did my hair in this fabulous way. And I had on boots that she liked. Do you still like my corset booties? Remember those?
Yeah, those were the 4-inch heels, I think.
I still have them. I will never throw them away.
Don't get rid of them. Yeah, they were amazing.
I still wear them. So she gave me a makeover. We had a fabulous chat. It was the beginning of her program. She asked me really great questions. I think I did my stupid human trick. I recited all the presidents like in 10 seconds.
Can you still do that?
I can still do it.
You should do that.
All right, I can do it. You guys want me to do it?
Yep.
All right.
Tell them.
So I'm going to recite all the presidents. I can do it in 10 seconds, but it's really fast. So, all right, I'll do it. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Washington, Adams, Jackson, Monroe, Adams, Jackson, Beard, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, Taylor, Pierce, Buchanan, Jason, Locke, Grant, Hayes, Cofferell, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, McGinley, Mercer, Taft, Wilson, Lordy, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Obama, Trump.
Whoa! Holy cow!
So I could.
Oh my gosh, I could never.
I think I've been reciting since I was in about first grade. So it's been like this. Like that's how they teach you in Catholic school. They just make you memorize stuff. So that was. Mm-hmm. I don't know what good that did for my critical thinking skills, but I can memorize things.
You guys, you can go to YouTube and type in Beauty and the Book Show with Karen Abbott and watch the show we did. It was great. Yeah. It was when we did the Gypsy American Rose book.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, and so Kat and I just loved her immediately. Went to Girlfriend's Weekend. I still have, I should send you more of the pictures I have. I dressed as Edgar Allan Poe. It was around the world. That was you had to be an author. You had to dress as a writer. So I still have my big Edgar Allan Poe mask, which was quite frightening.
It was scary. It was definitely scary. Yeah.
But Poe's sexy. I think Poe's sexy.
Yeah, I love Poe. And that was wild. She walked in the door with Bill Deadman, who was the author of Empty Mansions.
Empty Mansions.
He had we were going around the world with books, and he had a full NASA astronaut space uniform, and she was an American Airlines.
Oh yeah, that's right. We had to. It's so funny. I was trying to find like a non-stripper airline outfit because you type in airline outfit and they're all like cut down to here.
It's true. It's true.
I had to actually type in like non-stripper airline costume. You know, like.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they were all like woo, you know. So
oh man,
that was a fun party though. The party was so much fun. I was so sad to miss this year. Yeah. But anyway, it's always a good time. I can't wait for the next one. I know you're coming back next
we
season.
Hope that'll all be over by then. Let's pray about it, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely. But
anybody else want to jump in? Hi Danielle, just saw you over there.
Hi, Danielle.
Hey, sorry, I was late. I have terrible internet connection tonight.
That's all right. Hello?
Okay.
Danielle, and I'm fighting with 5 kids on the internet, so we'll see.
That's like a full-time job.
No, it's
Oh, it's a full-time gig all the
a
time.
Harlton thing.
Definitely. Did you have any questions? You want to ask anything? Or you-
No, I've been listening.
I
I think you've answered everything I was going to ask. So
Oh, right. I didn't put you on the spot. I just didn't want to.
What is
Yeah.
for everybody who hasn't heard the other times, what is the most surprising thing that you found out when you were researching this book that just kind of stopped you in your tracks? Was there anything in particular that just came along that you just was not expecting?
I did not expect the whole involvement of J. Edgar Hoover. He was 29 years old at this time in 1924 when he became the head of the Bureau of Investigation, which was the precursor to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I love the fact, number one, Mabel Walker Willenbrandt ordered him around like she was his boss. And I love the idea of Baby Edgar, as I called him. I love the idea of Baby Edgar being ordered around by a woman. And I did not expect that. She actually was responsible for Hoover getting promoted. So without Willenbrandt, he probably wouldn't have reached the heights and lows, I should say, that he did reach eventually. And the really interesting thing to me too was that J. Edgar Hoover, for all of the faults that he had during this time period, he was very interested in having a force of prohibition agents who were not corrupt, who did not take bribes, who were not in cahoots with bootleggers, who were really dedicated to enforcing prohibition in an honest way. And it was kind of, he was very serious about this. And I was kind of surprised at that. He was so serious about it that when he heard, that Imogene Remus, George Remus's wife, fell in love with a prohibition agent and they were sort of torturing George Remus, he sent an agent to look into it. So it's sort of like spy versus spy. And I'm not giving too much away, I don't think, when I say that Hoover's agent found some very interesting things going on between Franklin Dodge, who was cavorting with Imogene Remus. They were having a love affair, much to George Remus's dismay. He found out that Imogene Remus and Franklin Dodge, the agent, were stealing Remus's effects from his mansion. They were selling his whiskey certificates. And there was one great scene where he followed them to a hotel room and he literally caught Franklin Dodge with his pants down. Now, you don't often find a scene in nonfiction where somebody is like literally caught with their pants down. Like it just doesn't happen. And it just made me so much, again, grateful for this trial transcript, for the great amount of detail you had. And it was so much fun being able to write a nonfiction scene where this guy busted into a hotel room, found Imogene Remus and this prohibition agent with his pants down. And then of course, this being 1920, the very polite way that they tried to describe this, like, they didn't use explicit language. They were very polite in their reports.
A lot gentler.
Yeah, very proper. There was a proper way that they would describe these things. And it was just funny to read that with a 21st century eye, to see how they tried to be, have decorum. When they were reporting on finding people with their pants down, they were very decorous about it. They were very polite about it. So it was just kind of funny to see, number one, that happened, and number two, the way that they tried to handle it. I was also really surprised by, there were so many great ways that people smuggled liquor. And I talked about this a little bit the other night, but there were actually liquor submarines in New York Harbor that were raising and lowering out of sight. There was a soda parlor. There was a raid on a soda parlor, and they found in a back room that was full of children's squirt guns, but each squirt gun had a 2-drink capacity. There was a double amputee, a war veteran who was a double amputee who hid 36 pints in his prosthetics.
Oh my gosh.
Holy cow. And there was I'll bring one thing. I bought something off of eBay. It's actually a 1920s artifact. This cane, people ordered these canes.
Oh, yes.
And the cane would open up and you could hide alcohol in here and dump it into your drink wherever you were. And I found a picture of this online of some woman dumping alcohol in her coffee, looking quite pleased with herself, I might say. And so I went on eBay and found this thing, and I was I just had to have a little piece of that bootlegging history. So one of my favorite things for my research. So
You know,
I think I could use that now.
I know, right? I know. It's
Karen, I'll be walking around.
Karen, you mentioned a couple of TV shows that kind of sparked your stories, or the research. This one with Boardwalk and all. Have you heard of the show Peaky Blinders?
I have, and I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list. Do you recommend it?
Yes.
Yeah, and because they're the Irish gang that they actually are operating out of Ireland and London, but they are sending whiskey and gin to New York in the same time period that you're talking about,
Oh, wow.
you wrote about.
Oh, all right.
So,
It's always on my list. I thought it was back in the Victorian era. That's interesting. Okay.
No, it's at the turn of the century.
Okay.
And into like I think maybe the story starts in 1917 and it goes into it's during Prohibition.
How many seasons are there?
5.
5. Okay. Oh, I'll have to watch it. I've heard it's excellent. It's right up my alley. I love that stuff. So I'll have to check it out.
It gets very dark at the end. The 5th season, we just finished it. I think it was last year. I think there's another season coming, but
I'll check. I have to start watching then. I feel like there's so much good TV right now, and I can't even feel guilty about watching it because it's so well written. So I'm like, I'm not killing my brain. This is actually well written. So, yeah.
But you might get a new idea for a book that you've already got a lot of the research from different side of the pond, as they would say.
Yeah. Is it based on real people? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
It probably had a couple characters, probably.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Churchill is in there.
Oh, okay.
So
I'll check it out. You're not the first person that's told me. I should really watch it. Yeah. More TV to the queue. Is anybody watching Tiger King? It's so crazy.
My
God,
God.
I
had to because, oh my gosh, it's crazy. Are you watching it, Brooke? Are you guys watching it?
I watched the first episode today.
I just
had to know what the train wreck was all about.
Oh, it's
yes.
I wish I had found that for a book. That's amazing. It's amazing.
It reminds me of the craziness. Do you remember The Orchid Thief? It's that crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It's that crazy. But I have a tiger rescue place just down 15 minutes from me.
Oh my God.
And I've never been, and now I want to go because
I want to go too. We should go together.
Let's go, Brooke. Let's go check it out.
Yeah, I keep telling Leeward I want to go.
Go and report back.
Several of those cats that were taken in 2010 from Jefferson are there at that Tyler place.
Yep.
I didn't know that's where they were.
On Joe Davis Road. They were on Reba's Road, those guys. Those zoo people.
Yeah. Like in 2010, I had to look it up today to tell the girls about it.
Yeah.
There's like 65 animals that were taken.
Oh my God.
Yep. It was bad.
Yeah, that sounds bad. It's such a interesting stuff.
Well, Karen, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a book about that yet.
I know, but now it's like the story. I think that guy's been working on it for so long. I mean, now the story's out there. Like you can't, like it's done. You know what I mean? Like you can't.
But there's more. There's more places.
Yeah, there's more places.
I mean, there's a place in Jefferson, and they left all those animals, and they died, and they're all back there. In fact, one time, our van broke down coming back when the kids were little on Joe Davis Road outside of Jefferson, and my sister-in-law and I had to run in the rain to go get my father-in-law to get us out of the ditch. We slid off in the ditch.
Oh, my God.
And we're running down the road, walking down the road, when we heard a lion roar.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now, this is East Texas, and it sounded like it was right beside us.
Oh my God.
I'm not athletic, but Penny and I, we ran so fast, and we said, But they had bears, they had lions, they
Oh my
had
God.
tigers, and
She
it
was a retired
all on
circus
the
performer.
same
Is how
road
she
that
got
my
them all.
mother-in-law lived on, and so there's other stories that are probably even stranger.
I'll look that up. I'll have to look that up. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in 2010.
All right, I'll check
And
that
there
out.
was a lady
It was a
in
really big deal.
Avenger who used to dress in leopard skin and give tiger shows.
Oh my
You
God.
ever
Yeah.
go to that, Brooke? I did. I went to it.
Yes. Oh, I don't know that we went to it, but I remember.
There's a lot more. So there's other stories, but that would be
Right, I'm
a
gonna poke around.
jumping off point.
It's so like I'm such an animal person. It's so enraging when it's like to think about those animals being abused or discarded or abandoned. So
I don't think anybody starts out that way. I just think what happens is as people get into this, it turns into its own animal.
Yeah,
Weird way to
overwhelming.
say it, because I watched this show enough that I've seen these people go from, well, a little abnormal because they have this obsession, and then it goes somewhere, it crosses the
It goes
line.
from a hobby to
Yes.
yeah.
And then
Well,
it goes.
and I think the lady in Jefferson only got caught because that black puma got out, and that was the whole issue. Or the panther got out, and that was the issue. It had got out, and then all of a sudden, when they were investigating, they found all these other. It was like 65 animals.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And
That's
in Florida, when they had a hurricane hit, they all got loose out of this wild animal park, and the python started mating with the native snakes. Oh, it's you could find plenty of material.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That must have been like some super snake. That's like the ligers, which I think it's so weird. It's like, don't crossbreed. No, don't do that.
Yes, please. Don't.
If you have a bunch of animals,
They go through enough.
and they mate with the native panthers, you get all these weird things happening.
Yeah.
They never caught all those animals that got out during that hurricane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Wow.
Oh, so they're probably like still roaming around, like mating into some super thing.
There you go.
We're all going to be eaten by a giant snake. It's not going to be coronavirus. We're all going to be
I can't see.
by the mutant snakes and reptiles.
It's fine. It's totally fine.
You're like, yeah, that's okay. It's okay. So.
Well, does anybody have any?
This has been
So much fun.
I know.
really enjoyed
I'm happy to
Zoom
do this
chat.
time, by the way. Anybody else who wants to do this, I'm totally game. So just let me know, and I'll be there with my bird and my wine. So.
Well, it's a wide representation of Pulpwood Queens, and I'm sure as people sign up and get on board, there's going to be more people that come. But we've got many states involved here, so let's pass the word, everybody. Paul and Brooke are working really hard on, and Karen on getting this program going. But Karen will be on Breathless Bubbles and Books tomorrow, and hopefully, Karen, you can post more through the week, because just little tidbits, even if you just post just something short, we want to.
Yeah, definitely. I will be posting tomorrow at least, and then I'll post throughout this week.
Great. I've got you down. So good. Tell everybody.
If other chapters who might want to chat, let me know. I'm always around and available. So happy to do it. I love this. I think, I don't think people realize, like, you finish a book and you miss, the characters became your friends. Like, I shouldn't recommend anyone being friends with George and Imogene Remus, but they become your friends, and you miss them when it's over. So it's not only a nice chance to get to know you guys who I interact with online a lot, and see your faces and talk to you like a real person instead of online. It's a chance to revisit these old nefarious friends I wrote about. So it's cool. So.
Well, your book will be up for one of the books for Book of the Year. So by doing all this, I know our authors that participate with their Pulpwood Queen chapters, that's a smart move. So maybe you can come 2000.
Yeah, anybody who wants to spread the word, that'd be great. I'm always available.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
You guys all have
Thank
a good day.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you online tomorrow. I'll be on the Breathless Bubbles and Books. So
see you then.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Oh,
Thank you.
Bye, Karen.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.